The morning sun peeked through the clouds as Flight SQ-318 from Singapore touched down at Heathrow Airport. After 14 hours cramped in an airplane seat, Maya Chen's body ached all over. She stood up slowly, stretching her stiff legs while other passengers rushed to grab their bags from the overhead compartments. Maya didn't rush. Unlike most people returning from business trips, she wasn't wearing a fancy suit or designer clothes. Instead, she had on her favorite pair of worn blue jeans, a simple gray sweater, and comfortable walking shoes. Her dark hair was tied back, in a messy bun, and her face was free of makeup. The long flight had left dark circles under her eyes. "Would you like help with your bag, ma'am?" asked a flight attendant. Maya smiled and shook her head. "No, thank you, I can manage." Her voice was soft but clear. She pulled down her plain black suitcase, not one of those expensive brands, just a sturdy bag that had traveled with her for years. It wasn't that Maya couldn't afford better. As the wife of Alexander Chen, who owned Quantum Sphere Technologies, she could buy pretty much anything she wanted. But Maya had grown up in a small village where showing off wealth was considered rude. Old habits die hard. The airport was crowded as Maya followed the signs to immigration. She stood patiently in line, watching families reunite around her. A mother hugged her son so tight it made Maya smile. An elderly couple held hands as they walked slowly toward the exit. Little moments like these always caught Maya's attention more than fancy shops or shiny things. After clearing immigration and collecting her checked bag, Maya headed toward the first-class lounge. She had 3 hours before her connecting flight to Edinburgh, where she planned to visit a children's hospital that her husband's foundation was supporting. The foundation work was Maya's passion, the part of their wealth that truly made her happy. The first-class lounge entrance looked the same as always, sleek and modern with the airline's logo displayed prominently above double-glass doors. Maya approached with her membership card ready. She'd done this dozens of times before. Behind the reception desk stood a young man Maya hadn't seen on her previous trips. His name tag read Reginald. His hair was perfectly styled, and his uniform looked freshly pressed. He was helping an older gentleman in an expensive suit, nodding enthusiastically at whatever the man was saying. When it was Maya's turn, Reginald's smile faded slightly. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her worn jeans and simple shoes. Maya was used to such looks. They didn't bother her anymore. "Hello," she said politely, sliding her membership card across the counter. "I'd like to use the lounge while I wait for my connecting flight." Reginald picked up the card between 2 fingers as if it might be dirty. He looked at it, then back at Maya with raised eyebrows. "And how did you come by this card?" he asked, his voice dripping with doubt. Maya blinked, confused by the question. "It's mine. I'm a member." Reginald let out a small laugh that made Maya's cheeks warm with embarrassment. Several people nearby turned to look. "I'm sorry," he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "This lounge is for our actual first-class passengers." He emphasized the word actual while giving her another once-over. "Perhaps you found this card? Or someone gave it to you?" Maya took a deep breath. She wasn't one to make scenes or throw around her husband's name. There must be some mistake. "That card is valid. If you check the system, you'll see I'm a platinum member." Reginald's smile tightened. "Ma'am, I know our members, and they don't typically show up looking like—" He gestured vaguely at her outfit, leaving the insult hanging in the air. A few people in line behind Maya shifted uncomfortably. An older woman shook her head slightly, but no one spoke up. "Please check the system," Maya said again, her voice still calm despite the growing knot in her stomach. She'd faced prejudice before, but it never got easier. "I don't need to check anything," Reginald replied, pushing the card back toward her. "The general waiting area is that way." He pointed toward the crowded terminal seating. "I'm sure you'll be more comfortable there with the other economy passengers." Maya stood her ground. "I would like to speak to your manager, please." Reginald's face hardened. "Ma'am, you're holding up the line. I've asked you nicely to move along." "I'm a member," Maya repeated, taking her card back. I have every right to use this lounge. Reginald picked up a phone. For a second, Maya thought he was calling his manager. Instead, he said, "Security to the first-class lounge entrance, please. We have a situation." Maya felt her face grow hot as people stared. She wanted to explain, to pull out her phone and show them all exactly who she was. But that wasn't her way. Her grandmother had always told her that how you act when you're treated unfairly shows your true character. Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared. They were both tall men with serious expressions. "This woman is trying to access the lounge with what I believe to be a stolen membership card," Reginald explained, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's refusing to leave." "I'm not," Maya began, but one of the guards cut her off. "Ma'am, please come with us," he said firmly. Maya looked around. Everyone was watching now. Fighting would only make things worse. With as much dignity as she could gather, she nodded and followed the guards away from the lounge. They escorted her to the main terminal area, where hundreds of travelers waited on uncomfortable seats. One of the guards, perhaps feeling a bit sorry for her, pointed to a recently vacated seat. "You can wait here for your flight," he said, his tone softer than before. Maya thanked him quietly and sat down. She placed her suitcase between her feet and took out her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed. Alexander picked up on the second ring. "Maya, everything okay? You should be in London by now." Maya's voice stayed steady as she told him what happened. She didn't cry or complain, just stated the facts. When she finished, there was silence on the other end. "Alex, are you there?" "I'm here," he replied, his voice calm in a way that Maya recognized. It was the tone he used when he was angry but controlling it. "Are you hurt?" "No, just embarrassed," she admitted. "I'll be there soon," he said simply. "You don't need to come. Your meeting is not as important as you," he finished. "Stay where you are. I'm on my way." After they hung up, Maya took out her book, a paperback novel with a creased spine. She began to read, or at least pretend to, aware of the curious glances from nearby travelers who had witnessed her escort from the lounge. A young mother struggling with a crying baby sat down beside her. The woman looked exhausted, bouncing the baby while trying to find something in her diaper bag. "Would you like some help?" Maya offered. The woman looked up with grateful eyes. "Could you hold him for just a minute? I need to make his bottle." Maya took the fussing baby in her arms, smiling as his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. She began to hum softly, a lullaby her own mother had sung to her. The baby's cries subsided as he stared up at Maya with curious eyes. As she sat there, comforting a stranger's child while waiting for her husband, Maya knew that no fancy lounge could offer anything more valuable than this simple human connection. And, somewhere above the Atlantic, a private jet changed course carrying a man who understood exactly what real worth looked like. In a sleek glass building overlooking the Thames River, Alexander Chen sat at the head of a large conference table. 12 people in expensive suits watched as he reviewed the final details of their $4.2 billion acquisition. This deal would transform quantum sphere technologies from a major player to the industry leader in quantum computing. "So we're agreed on the terms," Alexander said, his voice quiet yet commanding. Unlike many powerful men, he never raised his voice. He found that speaking softly made people listen more carefully. "The transfer of assets will begin next Monday, and—" The conference room door opened slightly. Alexander's assistant Priya stood in the doorway, her expression apologetic but urgent. In 15 years, she had never interrupted a meeting this important. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen," she said. "It's your wife." A flicker of concern crossed Alexander's face, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't know him well. He excused himself with a small nod to the room and stepped outside. "What happened?" he asked Priya as the door closed behind him. "She called a few minutes ago. She's at Heathrow Airport. There was an incident at the first-class lounge." Priya handed him his phone. "She's on line 1. Alexander took the phone and pressed it to his ear. "Maya, are you okay?" As he listened to his wife's calm voice describe what had happened, Alexander's expression remained neutral. Anyone passing by would have thought he was discussing the weather. But Priya, who had worked with him for years, Notice the subtle changes, the slight tightening around his eyes, the way his free hand closed into a loose fist, then deliberately relaxed. When Maya finished speaking, Alexander asked a few questions, his voice as measured as ever. After hanging up, he stood silently for a moment. Cancel the rest of today's meetings, he told Priya, and have the jet ready in 30 minutes. Priya nodded, already typing on her tablet. What about the acquisition? They're waiting to finalize. Alexander looked through the glass wall at the executives shifting impatiently in their seats. The deal they were discussing would make headlines around the world. It had taken months to arrange. Tell them something personal has come up. We'll reconvene tomorrow. Alexander straightened his tie. I need to take care of my family. Should I call the airline? Priya asked. I can have someone fired within the hour. Alexander shook his head. That's not how Maya would want this handled. He handed her back the phone. But I do want everything you can find on the airport lounge management company, ownership structure, board members, financial reports from the last 5 years. I'll have it all by the time you reach the airport, Priya promised. Alexander returned to the conference room and apologized to the waiting executives. He explained that a family matter required his immediate attention, thanked them for their understanding, and assured them they would continue the next day. As he left the building, Alexander's driver, Wei, already had the car waiting. Unlike his business rivals who traveled with an entourage, Alexander preferred simplicity, a trait he shared with his wife. Heathrow Airport, Alexander told Wei. But first, we're stopping at home. During the drive to their London house, Alexander made several calls. He didn't raise his voice or make threats. He simply asked questions and gave instructions in the same calm manner he used in board meetings. By the time they reached the house, he had spoken to the CEO of the airline, the director of Heathrow Airport, and his company's legal team. Home. Alexander packed a small overnight bag. On his dresser sat a framed photograph of Maya in a garden, her hands dirty from planting flowers, her smile wide and genuine. He looked at it for a long moment before placing it carefully in his bag. 30 minutes later, Alexander's private jet took off from a small airfield outside London. As the plane climbed into the clouds, he sat in a comfortable leather chair, surrounded by documents Priya had sent over. Information about the company that managed the first-class lounges at Heathrow. The flight attendant, Lee, offered him a drink, which he declined. Is everything all right, Mr. Chen? Lee asked, having noticed his unusual request for an urgent flight. It will be, Alexander replied, his eyes never leaving the documents. As the jet crossed over the English Channel, Alexander reviewed what he'd learned. The lounge was operated by a company called Global Premium Services, which managed over 200 airport lounges worldwide. They had been cited twice in the past year for discriminatory practices, but had settled both cases quietly. Their CEO, a man named Richard Powell, was known for his focus on catering to the wealthiest clients. Alexander picked up his phone and dialed a number. David, he said when his head of public relations answered. I need you to look into something, for me. He explained the situation briefly. I want to know if this is a pattern with this company or just a one-time problem, and I want options for addressing it that would make Maya proud. David understood immediately. Maya's values had shaped many of the company's charitable initiatives. I'll have a proposal ready when you land, he promised. Meanwhile, at the airport cafe, Maya had finished her tea. The barista who had offered her the free drink, a young woman named Zara, came by to check on her. Can I get you anything else? Zara asked. You've been sitting here a while. Maya smiled and shook her head. Thank you, but I'm fine. My husband should be here soon. You sure? It's no trouble, Zara insisted. She had noticed how politely Maya had thanked her earlier, and how she'd helped a mother with her crying baby in the terminal. Zara had also seen the security guards escorting Maya away from the first-class lounge. The contrast between how Maya treated others and how she had been treated bothered Zara. Actually, Maya said, do you have any green tea? It's my husband's favorite, and he's had a long journey. Zara nodded and went to prepare the tea. When she returned, she placed 2 cups on the table. "One for you and one for your husband on the house." "That's very kind," Maya said. "What's your name?" "Zara." "Thank you, Zara. I'm Maya." They chatted briefly, and Maya learned that Zara was working at the airport to save money for university. By the time they finished talking, Maya had Zara's contact information and a promise to help her apply for one of the educational grants offered by her husband's foundation. As the afternoon wore on, Maya watched planes taking off and landing through the large windows. She thought about sending Alexander another message but decided against it. He would come when he could. In the air, Alexander reviewed the notes his team had sent over. By the time the jet began its descent toward Heathrow, he had formulated a plan, not for revenge but for change. Maya wouldn't want anyone to lose their job over this. She would want something more meaningful. And Alexander, who had built his empire by understanding what people truly valued, knew exactly how to make that happen. The plane touched down smoothly. As Alexander prepared to disembark, Lee handed him the small overnight bag. "Good luck with whatever you're facing, Mr. Chen," she said. Alexander thanked her with a nod. "Sometimes," he replied, "what looks like a problem is actually an opportunity to make things better." With those words, he stepped off the plane and headed toward the terminal, walking with purpose toward the woman who had taught him that true wealth had nothing to do with money and everything to do with how you treated people. The afternoon crowds at Heathrow had thinned slightly when the first whispers began. A group of airport staff huddled near the information desk, exchanging urgent words. Security personnel touched their earpieces, listening to instructions, then moved toward the international arrivals area. Something was happening. "Who's coming?" asked a cleaner, noticing the sudden activity. "Some big-shot businessman," replied a security guard. "Very last minute. Management's in a right state about it." Near the VIP entrance, the airport's operations director paced nervously, straightening his tie for the 3rd time. Beside him, the airline's regional manager checked her watch again. "His plane landed 10 minutes ago," she said. "He should be here any minute." "And you're sure it's Alexander Chen?" the director asked. "Positive." His office confirmed it. "Do you know who he is?" The director nodded. Everyone in business knew Alexander Chen, the man who had built quantum sphere technologies from nothing into a global empire. The 11th richest person in the world, according to last month's finance magazine. A man who rarely gave interviews, but whose decisions could affect stock markets worldwide. Did they say why he's coming? Is he investing in the airport expansion? The regional manager shook her head. No explanation, just that he was arriving and would appreciate a smooth entry. The sliding doors opened and both of them straightened up, professional smiles fixed in place. But it was just a flight crew, walking through. The directors relaxed, then tensed again as their earpieces crackled with updates. "He's coming through now," the security chief informed them. "No entourage, just him." This detail surprised them. Billionaires typically traveled, with an army of assistants and bodyguards. But when Alexander Chen walked through the doors moments later, he was indeed alone. He wore a simple dark suit with no tie. He carried a small overnight bag himself rather than having an assistant do it. Nothing about his appearance screamed wealth or power, yet something in the way he moved, calm, purposeful, completely self-assured, made people step aside instinctively. The directors moved forward, hands extended, introductions ready, but Alexander walked past them with a polite nod. His eyes scanned the terminal looking for someone else. "Mr. Chen," the airline manager called, hurrying after him. "Welcome to Heathrow. We're honored to have you with us. If there's anything at all we can do." "Thank you," Alexander said, his voice quiet but clear. "I'm looking for my wife." "Your wife?" The manager blinked in confusion. "I wasn't informed Mrs. Chen was traveling with you." "She arrived this morning, on flight SQ318 from Singapore." The manager's face paled slightly as connections began forming in her mind. "This morning? Would your wife be?" She hesitated. "About 5'6" Asian, dark hair and a bun." Alexander nodded once, his eyes still scanning the terminal. "Mr. Chen," There was an incident this morning with a woman trying to access our first-class lounge. Her voice had grown noticeably nervous. We had no idea. She didn't identify herself as... But Alexander was no longer listening. Through the crowds, he had spotted Maya sitting in a small airport cafe, reading her book. Without another word to the manager, he walked toward his wife. Across the terminal, Maya turned a page, unaware of the approaching commotion. The kind barista, Zara, noticed it first. The way people were looking toward the cafe entrance. The sudden appearance of phones taking pictures, the whispers spreading through the terminal. Maya? Zara said, touching her shoulder gently. I think someone's here for you. Maya looked up from her book and saw Alexander approaching. Her face brightened with a smile that transformed her tired features. She stood up just as he reached the table. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Alexander took both her hands in his and bent slightly to meet her eyes directly. Are you okay? He asked softly. Maya nodded. Just tired. You didn't need to come all this way. Yes, I did. With those 3 simple words, spoken quietly, yet with absolute certainty, Alexander gently pulled her into a hug. Maya rested her head against his chest, closing her eyes briefly. Nearby, Zara watched with wide eyes as the realization dawned on her. The simple, kind woman she'd been serving tea to all afternoon was married to one of the most powerful men in the world. Zara wasn't the only one making this connection. All around the cafe, people were whispering and pointing discreetly. Some were Googling on their phones, confirming what they suspected. Is that Alexander Chen? The tech billionaire? That's his wife? The one security kicked out this morning? Someone's getting fired today. The whispers grew as more people recognized him from news stories and magazine covers. Phones appeared, recording the scene as Alexander knelt down to gather Maya's worn suitcase, insisting on carrying it himself despite her protests. I made a friend, Maya told him, gesturing toward Zara, who was standing frozen behind the counter. She's been very kind to me. Alexander turned to Zara with a genuine smile. Thank you for looking after my wife. Zara managed to nod, her cheeks flushing. It was no problem. She's really nice. Yes, she is, Alexander agreed, his eyes warm, with affection as he looked back at Maya. The best person I know. The airport's operations director and the airline manager had followed Alexander to the cafe and now stood awkwardly at the entrance, unsure how to proceed. Behind them, a larger crowd was gathering, curious onlookers, airport staff who had heard something was happening, and more senior management rushing to the scene. Mr. Chen, the airline manager began again, her voice strained with anxiety. Please allow me to apologize personally for any misunderstanding this morning. Had we known who Mrs. Chen was, Alexander raised his hand slightly, cutting off her words. The gesture was small but effective. The entire cafe fell silent. That's exactly the problem, he said, his voice still quiet, but somehow carrying to every corner. You shouldn't treat people differently based on who you think they are, or aren't. The manager's face flushed with embarrassment as Alexander continued. My wife was a member of your lounge. She had the correct credentials. She was treated poorly because of how she looked, not because of any valid reason. Maya touched his arm, gently. Alex, it's okay. We don't need to make a scene. It's not okay, he replied, covering her hand with his. But you're right about the scene. He turned back to the manager. We'll discuss this properly, but not here. The crowd watching the scene had grown larger. Many were recording with their phones. A few were live streaming the confrontation. The story of the billionaire rushing to his wife's defense after she was kicked out of an airport lounge was already spreading across social media. Alexander noticed the cameras and placed his arm protectively around Maya's shoulders. She had never liked being in the spotlight, and he could feel her tensing beside him. Let's go, he said softly, just for her. The car's waiting. As they turned to leave, Zara called out, Wait! She hurried around the counter, holding a piece of paper. Your tea receipt, she explained to Maya, handing it over. But when Maya looked down, she saw Zara had written her university information on it. You mentioned that foundation? For education? Maya smiled and carefully folded the paper into her pocket. I'll call you tomorrow, she promised. As Alexander and Maya walked through the terminal, the crowd parted for them. People were still taking pictures, still whispering. Security guards now flanked them, though Alexander hadn't requested this. Near the exit, they passed the first-class lounge where Maya had been turned away hours earlier. Through the glass doors, she could see Reginald, the attendant who had called security on her. He was standing frozen behind the counter, his face pale as he recognized first Maya, then Alexander. Maya paused, and for a moment, everyone thought she might say something to the man who had humiliated her. Instead, she gave him a small, almost sympathetic smile and continued walking. Outside, a sleek black car waited. As Alexander helped Maya inside, the airport director made one last attempt. Mr. Chen, if you'd allow us to make this right. Alexander paused before getting into the car. We'll be in touch, he said simply. Tomorrow. As the car pulled away from the curb, Maya leaned her head on Alexander's shoulder. Thank you for coming, she said. But what happened with your big meeting? The acquisition? It can wait, Alexander replied, putting his arm around her. Some things are more important. Maya smiled and closed her tired eyes, knowing that by tomorrow her husband would have figured out a way to turn this unpleasant experience into something positive. That was what he did best, not wielding power for revenge, but using it to create meaningful change. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when Alexander woke up in their London townhouse. Maya was still asleep beside him, her face peaceful after yesterday's ordeal. He slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to disturb her. In the kitchen, Alexander made coffee and opened his laptop. Overnight, videos of their airport encounter had spread online. Airport Billionaire was trending, with people sharing their own stories of being judged by their appearance. Alexander scrolled through some of the comments, his expression thoughtful. His phone buzzed with a message from Priya. Meeting set up with airline executives, 10 a.m. at their headquarters. Alexander replied with a simple thank you and went back to reading the public's reaction. Many were calling for Reginald to be fired. Others wanted a boycott of the airline. The story had struck a nerve with people worldwide. When Maya walked into the kitchen an hour later, Alexander was on a video call with his team. He immediately ended the call when he saw her. Good morning, he said, pouring her favorite green. Iko, how did you sleep? Better than expected, Maya replied, accepting the cup gratefully. Are we famous now? She nodded toward his laptop, where a news site displayed their photo from the airport. Alexander smiled slightly. Just for today. Tomorrow they'll find something else to talk about. Maya sat down beside him, looking at the screen. People want that man fired, don't they? Alexander nodded. That seems to be the popular opinion. And what's your opinion? Maya asked, studying his face. I think firing one person doesn't solve the real problem, Alexander replied. What about you? What do you want to happen? Maya thought for a moment, warming her hands around the teacup. I don't want anyone to lose their job. That doesn't help. Anything. She looked up at her husband. But I do think something should change. Alexander smiled and reached for her hand. I was hoping you'd say that. I have some ideas, but I'd like your input. For the next hour, they talked through Alexander's plan. Maya suggested changes, improvements, ways to make it more compassionate. By the time they finished breakfast, they had a proposal that satisfied them both. Are you sure you want to come with me to the meeting? Alexander asked as they prepared to leave. You don't have to. Maya nodded firmly. This happened to me. I should be part of fixing it. The car dropped them at the airline's headquarters, a towering glass building in central London. In the lobby, nervous executives were waiting to greet them. Alexander recognized the regional manager from the airport, standing alongside 5 other people in expensive suits. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, the airline's CEO said, stepping forward with an extended hand. Thank you for coming. I'm Thomas Wilson. On behalf of everyone at Global Airways, I want to express our deepest apologies for yesterday's incident. Alexander shook his hand firmly. Thank you for meeting with us on such short notice. Of course, Thomas replied, gesturing toward the elevators. We've prepared our executive boardroom for this discussion. Everyone is waiting upstairs. The elevator ride was silent and tense. When they reached the top floor, the doors opened to reveal a panoramic view of London. In a large conference room, several more executives sat around a polished table, along with the company's legal team. Thomas ushered Alexander and Maya to seats at the head of the table. Before we begin, I want to assure you that the employee involved has been suspended pending termination. We've also prepared a compensation package and, actually, Alexander interrupted gently, that's not why we're here. A confused silence fell over the room. The executives exchanged glances. I'm sorry, I don't understand, Thomas said. Surely you expect some form of compensation for this unacceptable treatment? Maya spoke up, her voice soft but clear. What happened yesterday wasn't about me personally. It happens to people every day who don't have powerful husbands to come to their rescue. The executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Alexander opened his laptop. We're not interested in firing one employee or accepting personal compensation. We'd like to propose something different. He turned the screen to show a presentation titled Respectful Service Initiative. This is a comprehensive training program, Alexander explained, designed to address unconscious bias and promote respectful treatment of all customers, regardless of how they look or what they're wearing. For the next 30 minutes, Alexander outlined the proposal. The program would include required training for all customer-facing staff, a review of company policies, mystery shoppers to test fair treatment, and a scholarship fund for employees from disadvantaged backgrounds. When he finished, Maya added, We don't want Reginald fired. We want him to be part of this program. Sometimes people who've made mistakes become the best teachers. The airline executives looked stunned. They had expected demands, threats, perhaps even a lawsuit. Instead, they were being offered a solution. This is unexpected, Thomas said slowly. You're offering to help us create this program? Not just create it, Alexander replied. Fund it. Quantum Sphere Technologies will commit $10 million to launching this initiative with one condition. Which is? Asked the legal director, looking suspicious. That Global Airways matches our contribution and implements the program across all your global locations, not just here in London. Murmurs spread around the table. $10 million was a significant amount, but so was the matching requirement. May I ask why you're doing this? Thomas questioned. Most people in your position would be demanding resignations. Maya and Alexander exchanged a glance before Maya answered. When I was growing up, my grandmother told me that how you respond to mistreatment shows your true character. Seeking revenge doesn't solve problems. Creating positive change does. Her simple words hung in the air. Several executives looked down, perhaps reflecting on how they might have reacted in the Chen's position. There's one more thing, Alexander said, turning to a new slide. On it was a photograph of Zara, the barista who had been kind to Maya. This young woman is trying to save money for university. As part of this program, we'd like to establish a scholarship fund for service workers like her. People who demonstrate exceptional kindness and character. The head of human resources, a woman who had been silent until now, spoke up. I actually think this could benefit us tremendously. Our customer satisfaction ratings have been declining. This could turn a potential PR disaster into a positive story. Thomas studied Alexander and Maya carefully. You're serious about this, aren't you? You don't want revenge or money. You actually want to solve the underlying problem. Yes, Alexander said simply. After a moment, Thomas nodded. We'll need to discuss the details, but in principle, I think we can work with this proposal. Relieved smiles appeared around the table as the tension eased. For the next 2 hours, they discussed implementation details, timelines, and metrics for measuring success. As the meeting concluded, Thomas walked Alexander and Maya to the elevator. I have to admit, when I heard Alexander Chen was coming to my office after what happened, I feared for my job. he said with a nervous laugh. Maya smiled. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't the most obvious one. When they reached the U lobby, a familiar face was waiting nervously by the reception desk. Reginald, the lounge attendant, stood with his hands clasped tightly in front of him. When he saw Maya, his face paled. "Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice shaking. "Mr. Chen, I came to apologize in person. What I did was inexcusable. I understand I'll be losing my job, and I accept that consequence." Maya stepped toward him. "Actually, Reginald, if you're willing, we have something else in mind for you." Reginald looked up, confusion replacing fear in his eyes. "Sometimes," Alexander said, "the people who make mistakes have the most to teach others about getting things right."